We are down to match number 6 of 10 in our top 10 countdown of the greatest championship matches in Royal Rumble history. Last week, number 7 in the countdown took us back to 2017 and John Cena's 16th world title win over AJ Styles. And so this week, number 6 in the countdown takes us back 10 years before that to the Royal Rumble in 2007 and the last man standing match for the WWE Championship, only this time it was John Cena defending the title against the Samoan Bulldozer Umaga, or as William Regal would say, Umanga. And before he was Umanga, he was in WWE years earlier as Jamal. He was one half of 3 Minute Warning with his partner Rosie, who was the brother, of course, of Roman Reigns. When I reflect back on Umaga's career, he was part of a few big matches and moments, quite a few, in WWE history. The Billy and Chuck wedding segment on SmackDown is one of the more memorable angles, I think, in the history of that show. He was part of that. He did a run-in. He was one half of what had been, before Cena and Rock in Miami, the biggest box office attraction in WrestleMania history, that Battle of the Billionaires match against Bobby Lashley. Umaga was Vince McMahon's surrogate in the match against Donald Trump's surrogate, Bobby Lindsay, as Trump called him once. And then this match here, which really is one of the best matches in Royal Rumble history. After he left the company, I know he went to TNA for a while. He went to Japan for a little bit. He came back in 2006, and they gave him the Umaga gimmick. And I always wondered, if the reason for this was because they were interested in Samoa Joe, and maybe they couldn't get Samoa Joe, or, maybe that's just an old wives' tale. I don't know if they were interested in him or not. I kind of would joke that if Joe ever did come to WWE, they would just kind of call him Joe Maga and put him in that gimmick. Thankfully, that did not happen. It didn't happen probably because he went to NXT first. He had enough sense to go there first before he hit the main roster. But they gave him the Umaga gimmick, and he went undefeated for all of 2006 until meeting John Cena in a singles match for the very first time at New Year's Revolution at the beginning of 2007. And they had a match, and Umaga just completely dominated until he got rolled up. It was like a fluke roll-up by John Cena for the shock pin. That handed him his very first loss, his first pinfall loss. And this here, at the Royal Rumble, a few weeks later, was the rematch. Umaga was probably the first monster, who was really groomed to be fed, I would say, to John Cena. Years later, it would be Rusev in the same spot. Rusev went undefeated for a year until he ran into the brick wall that was John Cena. And, for a guy who went undefeated for so long, the beginning of 2007, when you look back, was not very kind to Umaga from a win-loss perspective in big matches. He lost to John Cena twice in 1 month that January. First at New Year's Revolution, and then again here at the Royal Rumble. And then at WrestleMania, he lost to Bobby Lashley. I'm sure he got a nice big fat payday out of it. But win-loss-wise, not a very strong start to the new year for Umaga. Cena, meanwhile, was right back. He was right in the middle of the Cena sucks, Cena can't wrestle, hate that was going on with the fans here in this era. And yet, when this match was over, to show you how good it really was, people largely cheered him. And I think probably respected him a little bit more, at least as far as being able to put on a great match against somebody not named Kurt Angle and against somebody not named Shawn Michaels. So it was quite the sight to see, because he definitely got boos coming out, and this was in the middle of the whole Boo Birds period, which would go on for many years. But yeah, you watch as the match went on towards the end, and then when it was over, the fans gave him a standing ovation. And Cena came into this match, his ribs were all taped up from an earlier attack on Raw by Umaga. He sold his ass off with these ribs for a good part of the match. It was kind of sluggish at the beginning because of all the selling, and just that's all he was doing. He was getting beaten up by Umaga and selling and selling. And, when I think of the use of steel steps, which is when this match really started to pick up, I always think of this match. It always reminds me when I see the steps being thrown into the ring and thrown around and being used as a weapon. It always makes me think of this match. The steps were a very big part of this match. They were propped up in the corner at one point. They were slamming each other onto them. There was this wicked spot where Umaga was standing outside the ring, and Cena picked the steps up. He lifted them up, and he launched them out of the ring right into Umaga's face. It was this great bump. Thankfully, he got his hands up, or else that would have ended very badly for him. Cena went for an AA on the steps, or I guess an FU it was still called back then. That's WWE's favorite move they like to use on the fans. But Umaga was too heavy. Cena fell face first onto the steps, and when he came up, he was bleeding all over the place. He was bleeding like a stuck pig, and boy did he bleed. Boy did he bleed. You know, it is also funny, when you go back and watch the match, because I go back and I've watched all of these matches over again, because I had to rank them, so I wanted to see where the appropriate spot would be. So I watched this match now twice in the last few weeks. And when Cena comes up bloody, after clearly blading himself, you hear Jim Ross on commentary. He actually says Cena blades, but then he catches himself. And then he says, oh, Cena bleeds, or Cena's bleeding. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And he did bleed. I mean, Cena has bled a few gushers in his career. The match with JBL at Judgment Day in '05 stands out to me. This was another one. His face was just drenched in blood. And he hulked up at one point. He started punching himself in the head to psych himself up, face full of blood, told Umaga to give him some more. He was firing himself up. The crowd was just eating this whole thing up here. And the crowd was fully behind him at that point. It's just too bad the same thing didn't work for Roman Reigns in his match with Brock Lesnar this year at WrestleMania. Remember, Roman was bleeding all over the place. He bled a gusher too. Didn't matter. Fans did not care. They probably didn't care because the match sucked. One of the worst WrestleMania main events you'll ever see. But what worked for Cena back then did not work for Roman this year. He grabbed, Cena did, a television monitor off the announce desk at one point. He whacked Umaga in the head with it. And later on, Cena found himself laid out across the English announce desk. Umaga cleared off the other two announce tables that were sitting beside it, and he ran across both announce desks, and he did a belly flop onto the third one. But Cena rolled out of the way, and the table collapsed under the guy's weight. So you had Armando Alejandro Estrada outside in Umaga's corner. He was Umaga's manager. He was his mouthpiece. He was out there on the apron loosening the top rope. So now, all of a sudden, the top rope snaps. We have no top rope. And he hands Umaga one of the steel beams, one of the steel rods from one of the corners to use as a weapon. But when he comes at Cena, Cena catches him, hits a giant AA, and then Cena grabs the steel rod. He whacks Umaga across the back with it, which elicited an impromptu goddamn from Jim Ross on commentary. That's what he said. He got very animated here. And then came the finish, which was tremendous and appropriately violent, I thought, for a match with this stipulation. You know, it's jarring to go back and watch because WWE, not only do they not allow choking anymore, they haven't allowed choking since 2007, the very same year that this match took place. You know, later on after the Benoit murders, that was one of the things that they did not allow. It's one of the reasons why Daniel Bryan was briefly fired in 2010 when they did the Nexus angle and he choked out Justin Roberts with his own tie. For some odd reason, they still allow choke slams, but they do not allow choking in WWE matches. And so to go back and watch John Cena here wrapping the top rope around Umaga's neck, around his throat, and yanking back like he's trying to rip this guy's head off, yeah, it's pretty jarring. He's got him in the STFU with that rope wrapped around his throat. He's just choking the life out of Umaga. Jim Ross had a great line in here where he said, "Even a monster's gotta breathe." I just thought that was such a great line. Umaga's eyes start rolling into the back of his head. His tongue is sticking out. He's gasping for air. Finally, he passes out. And it's a last man standing match. So the referee starts the 10 count. About midway through, Umaga starts to waken. Somehow. So Cena wraps the rope back around his throat again and chokes him out again. And this time, Umaga did not answer the referee's 10 count. John Cena wins. And the crowd erupts into wild cheers. For John Cena, they erupt into cheers. That right there is one of the best matches of John Cena's career. And a few months later, he would have another best match of his career, this time against Shawn Michaels in the UK. Their WrestleMania match was very good also, but it was not the sort of classic match I think that their Raw match is. Umaga, I feel, is somewhat underrated for the talent that he had. I always thought the Samoan Savage gimmick was just way too goofy. Even in 2006, I felt we were long past that. That Umaga character felt like something that was lifted out of 1989 WWE. And it always felt so out of place. It felt completely out of place at WrestleMania 23. You know, you had Vince McMahon and Donald Trump, and you knew that this was going to get a lot of mainstream publicity. And I just remember thinking to myself, of all the people to put in that match, you're going with the goofy Umaga gimmick. It just never really made a lot of sense to me. But goofy though it may have been, he made it work. He had real talent. You know, that same year, he had some great matches with Jeff Hardy, I remember, for the IC title. Those two work real well together. Part of the reason why I hope Jeff Hardy and Samoa Joe can work well together now. And, you know, it's a shame that he passed away at such a young age. He was only 36 when he died. But go back and watch this match. I enjoyed this way more than I did that plotting last man standing match between Shawn Michaels and Triple H from the 2004 Royal Rumble. I know that's going to upset some people. That's sacrilegious for me to say for some people, but it's true.